There's something behind the silence of this forest. It isn't human. Yet it feels almost human sometimes. It seems as if the forest itself is breathing. Do you want to see it? This is Whisper from History, where forgotten voices rise again. In the deep wilderness of North America, beneath the whispering canopy of pine and fir, where the mist clings to the earth, like a living breath, a legend began to take shape. Hunters spoke of it first. A sound like no other, a guttural cry that rolled through the valleys in the dead of night. It was neither man nor beast, yet it echoed with an eerie familiarity, as if the forest itself were calling out to something ancient, something forgotten. In the Pacific Northwest, where rain never seems to end, and shadows stretch long across the moss-covered ground, the first real encounters were whispered around campfires. Men returned from the mountains, pale and shaken, speaking of towering silhouettes glimpsed through fog. A shape walking upright, its stride too human, its bulk too monstrous. Tracks were found larger than any known animal, each print sunk deep into the wet earth, with the weight of something immense. Locals began to call it Bigfoot. In 1958, a bulldozer operator named Jerry Crew stumbled upon enormous footprints near Bluff Creek in California. Each track measured 16 inches long and nearly 7 inches wide. He made a plaster cast and took it to the local newspaper. By morning, the name Bigfoot had been printed in bold black letters across the front page. That was when the myth escaped the forest and entered the imagination of the world. But before the headlines, before the cameras, before the hoaxes, there were older tales. The indigenous tribes of the Pacific Northwest spoke of a creature they called Sas, a guardian of the forest, a being of flesh and spirit. They warned that to mock its presence was to invite misfortune. To see it was to glimpse the line between man and nature. Those stories carried weight long before the modern world began to question them. In the decades that followed, countless sightings poured in, from Washington to British Columbia, from the deep forests of Oregon to the snowy ridges of Alaska. Truck drivers, late-night hikers, and isolated campers all told the same tale. A sound in the darkness, a heavy step behind the trees. The feeling of being watched by something unseen but unmistakably aware. Many described a stench thick and foul like decay and damp fur. Others spoke of glowing amber eyes, staring from the undergrowth. But what was really happening behind the curtain? In 1967, a shaky strip of film changed everything. Roger Patterson and Bob Gimlin rode horseback along Bluff Creek and captured what they claimed was the clearest proof of Bigfoot. A tall, muscular figure striding through the clearing, its head turning briefly toward the camera. The footage, grainy and unstable, has been studied frame by frame for decades. Experts split down the middle. Some saw an elaborate costume, others saw anatomy impossible for a man to fake. Muscle movement under fur, a natural gait, a calm indifference to the human observers. Could it truly have been real? The years that followed turned Bluff Creek into a pilgrimage site for believers and skeptics alike. Scientists trekked into the woods, armed with infrared cameras and bait traps. Tabloids printed lurid stories of Bigfoot families hiding in the wilderness. Tourists bought plaster foot casts as souvenirs. And yet, despite all the noise, despite the obsession, no body was ever found, no skeleton, no definitive proof. But deep within the Olympic Peninsula, stories continued to surface. Rangers found torn tents, abandoned with claw-like rips. Hunters heard tree knocks echoing across valleys, a rhythm too deliberate to be coincidence. One logging crew swore they saw a massive silhouette standing at the tree line watching in total stillness. When they turned their lights on, it vanished. The next morning their equipment was overturned, their fuel drums smashed. Something had come in the night and left without a trace. In the 1970s, a wave of hysteria swept through the Pacific Northwest. Radio shows buzzed with Bigfoot reports. Communities formed, search parties. One man claimed to have recorded a Bigfoot scream, a sound so piercing that wildlife experts could not identify it. The mystery deepened. People began to ask, was it a missing link between man and ape? Was it an undiscovered species surviving in isolation? Or was it something older, something spiritual, wearing the mask of flesh? A researcher named Grover Krantz stood among the few who dared to treat the subject seriously. An anthropologist by training, he believed that the creature could be a remnant of Gigantopithecus, an ancient ape thought, extinct for hundreds of thousands of years. He collected casts of footprints, studied dermal ridges, and pressure patterns. To him, the evidence pointed toward a living, breathing species. He presented his findings to the academic world. They laughed, but Krantz did not stop. He believed that somewhere beyond the reach of modern science something extraordinary still walked. In the small towns of Oregon and Washington, local law enforcement began to keep unofficial logs of strange encounters. Patrolmen followed reports of screams and found shattered branches 15 feet above the ground. Farmers awoke to find their chicken coops ripped open and footprints leading into the forest. In one chilling account, a family camping near Mount St. Helens reported a figure circling their tent all night. When dawn came, they found prints surrounding the camp, each one perfect in the dew. They packed and left in silence, never to return. By the 1980s, the legend had split into two worlds, one of media spectacle and one of raw human experience. Television turned Bigfoot into a cultural icon. Movies, comic books, commercials, even theme parks used its image. Yet for those who had heard that scream in the night or seen the movement behind the fog, it was no joke. To them, Bigfoot was not a myth, it was a presence. Something that reminded them how little control humans had in the face of wilderness. But this was only the beginning. New technologies began to probe the forests. Thermal drones, night vision, cameras, motion sensors, all hunting for the truth. Yet the more the tools advanced, the more elusive the creature became, as if it learned, as if it understood that the eyes of man were closing in. Sightings grew rarer, encounters shorter, the silence deeper. Then came reports from the Appalachian Mountains, thousands of miles east. Miners in West Virginia spoke of screams echoing through the hollows. In Tennessee, hikers found prints identical to those from the Pacific Northwest. Was the creature migrating? Or were there many of them scattered across the continent, unseen but always near? In 1992, a group of biologists discovered strange hair samples caught in bark near the Cascade Range. The DNA results were inconclusive. Neither human nor known primate. The mystery deepened once again. For every skeptic, there was another believer. And for every believer, another unanswered question. But perhaps the truth of Bigfoot lies not only in the evidence. Perhaps it lives in the need for mystery itself. In the longing to believe that beyond our cities, beyond the reach of satellites and screens, something wild still endures. Something that watches from the edge of the firelight, that breathes in the mist, that remembers when the forests belonged to silence. In recent years, new witnesses have come forward. Hunters with thermal scopes catching fleeting shapes. Campers finding massive handprints pressed into tents. Truckers on lonely highways, seeing figures cross the road, in the rain vanishing into blackness. Each story adds a thread to the tapestry of legend. Each retelling keeps the heartbeat alive. Yet science demands proof, and proof remains a ghost. Skeptics say every print can be faked, every sound explained, every image staged. But the wilderness keeps its secrets. Well, no matter how many searchers enter the woods, the forest decides what it reveals. And sometimes, it reveals nothing at all. But what if the secret was never meant to be found? What if Bigfoot is not an animal to be captured or studied, but a reflection, a mirror held up to humankind, reminding us of the wild that still lives within us, the part that fears the dark and yet hungers for it, the part that listens when the night goes still? The legend of Bigfoot endures because it touches something older than science, a sense of awe, a pulse of wonder the forests breathe, and within that breath, the possibility remains, somewhere in the rain-drenched hills of the northwest beyond, the rivers and the ridges, where fog curls like smoke, something walks unseen, leaving behind only silence and the faint echo of a step too large to be ours. Even today, when the fog rises and the winds begin to howl, people say they feel a strange weight in their hearts, as if footsteps had passed, but not human ones. To uncover more untold mysteries like this, subscribe now to Whisper from History, where every silence hides a story.